All right, team, let's go deep down the rabbit hole here for a second together. What if Trump was right about Ukraine? This is an analysis that Byron York has put out from the Washington Examiner. And it just lays out what I have, what is essentially an argument or at least information, data points that bolsters what I've been saying all along to you, which is that looking into the Bidens and Ukraine and Burisma is an entirely legitimate exercise. In fact, it would be legitimate from my perspective to have the Department of Justice look into those matters, which if Trump really wanted to just go after Biden as aggressively as possible, he could do. Right? He could say, look, I need the attorney general. People would say, oh, would he ever publicly do this? I mean, tell the attorney general, I want answers about what happened in Ukraine. Look into it. Open the investigation. There is no special immunity from investigation for issues that touch upon Senator Joe Biden or his family. There's certainly no immunity for investigation as far as libs are concerned when it comes to Trump. They claim there's immunity from prosecution, right? And that's what's been said now as well by the White House. We'll see if that's true. They would love to bring charges against him. But let's just go over some of the facts. Yesterday, I read to you from that Politico article. And that Politico article, and that was at a time when there was a belief that Hillary Clinton was definitely going to be the president. And Obama's foreign policy apparatus was tightly enmeshed in situations going on in Ukraine, and his ambassadors, his appointees, Obama's, were running foreign policy in that country. And Politico did this story, though, on how there were people at the Ukraine embassy, employees of the Ukrainian government, who were trying to be helpful to their American and, in this case, under a Democrat administration counterparts, to give information damaging to President Trump, specifically information about Paul Manafort and his dealings in Ukraine. But that, my friends, would be foreign interference in an election, wouldn't it? This is what we've always been told. That even if, for example, nothing was exchanged in a meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner and all the rest at Trump Tower, just sitting down and listening to somebody who said they had information about Hillary Clinton, they said that was treason at one point, which is insane, by the way. These people are nuts, but we got to put that aside for a moment. So the Politico story still stands. There were journalists at that time who were willing to look into this and find out that there were Ukrainian government officials that seemed to want to help Hillary. And we should know about that. We should also know if those Democrat appointees in the State Department apparatus were perhaps even not just happy to try to get that information, but were giving them instructions, collection requirements, if you will, saying, hey, go get this for me, go get that for me. First up, Byron York's piece here. Government ministers attack. During the summer of 2016, candidate Trump was under constant criticism for being insufficiently critical of Russian President Vladimir Putin. From Ukraine's perspective, Trump's Crimea statements were linked to the presence of Paul Manafort in the Trump campaign. First hired in March of 2016 to organize delegate support, Manafort was promoted to campaign chairman in June. Trump's comments on Crimea set off a strong reaction in Ukraine. Some high-ranking members of the Ukrainian government took to social media in an attempt to influence as best they could the U.S. presidential race. Arsen Avakov, at that time the Interior Minister, tweeted that Trump was a, quote, clown, and added that the Republican candidate was, quote, an even bigger danger to the U.S. than terrorism. That's the interior minister of Ukraine. Oh, yeah. That seems like somebody has something to say. On Facebook, Avakov wrote, the shameless statement of U.S. President candidate Donald Trump on the possible recognition of Crimea as Russia is a diagnosis of a dangerous outcast. He is dangerous both for Ukraine and the U.S. to the same extent. An outcast bowing down to Putin's dictatorship cannot be the guarantor of democratic freedoms in the U.S. and the world. Avakov suggested Manafort was responsible for Trump's position. Where will Manafort take Trump? Avakov asked. He completed the post by adding a photo of a mural in Vilnius portraying Trump and Putin in a passionate kiss, which is popular in hashtag resistance circles around the world. End quote here from this Byron York piece in the Washington Examiner. Okay. Now, remember, what we're establishing here is the context, the environment in 2016 in Ukraine, in Kyiv, which everyone says now. It used to be Kiev, right? But now all the cool kids say Kyiv. Just like no one says the Ukraine. Now everyone knows it's just Ukraine. Was in Kyiv at the embassy there. What were the sentiments like of the government before Zelensky came in? Right? What was going on in this Ukrainian regime at the time? And the answer is that you had very, very top figures who were decidedly, openly anti-Trump and worried about Trump. And not just they didn't like him, but they were worried about a Trump presidency because, the recognition, for example, of Crimea as legitimate, that would be an enormous slap in the face to Ukraine. They would completely freak out about that. And so you start thinking, well, hold on a second. Explain to me, then, the lengths that these different Ukrainian politicians and ministers and officials would be willing to go to prevent an American president from winning a U.S. election that could result in a cutoff of the aid that we've all been told is so near and dear to the Ukrainians in fighting against the Russians, a friendly voice for Putin, and recognition of Crimea. None of those things, by the way, ended up being true, which also makes one think how much of the perception of these Ukrainian officials was driven by Democrat Obama administration appointees and employees in Ukraine, Americans who were telling the Ukrainians, if Trump wins, you guys are screwed. I'm just putting, we're working through this together. Okay. So there's clearly motive, and we already have one individual here, the Interior Minister, not a coffee boy that no one's ever heard of. Okay, the Interior Minister of Ukraine saying that Trump is a huge danger and it's terrible and he's awful. Interesting. Back to this Byron York piece. At about the same time, a former Prime Minister, Harsanyi, it's a fun name to say, made the case that Trump's statement on Crimea and Putin made his campaign fair game for Ukrainians. Trump's comments, quote, go beyond any form of domestic political campaigning, Yatsenyuk wrote. An official candidate for the United States presidential election has challenged the very values of the free world, civilized world order, and international law. This guy's a former prime minister of Ukraine. It's be like, imagine if, George W. Bush is writing that about somebody, and they're like, oh, but there was no anti-sentiment from the government. Strange, isn't it? What about Donald Trump? What Donald Trump said about Crimea today, Yatsenyuk wrote, might tomorrow extend to some other part of the world, in Europe, Asia, or the Americas, and that makes it worrisome for everyone. For everyone. Including apparently, perhaps employees of the Ukraine embassy, or rather employees of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry working with and interacting with Americans at the embassy in Kyiv. Perhaps. We wouldn't really know, though, would we, unless we had a full accounting of this, unless there was an investigation of this. Number 2 here in Byron's list. The ambassador takes a position. At about the same time as a government minister and a former top official were taking to social media, Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S., Valery Chali, wrote an op-ed published in The Hill. He used much more temperate language, but he said that Trump's statements on Crimea have raised serious concerns in Kyiv and beyond Ukraine, and they were in sharp contrast to the Republican Party platform, and they were in contrast to bipartisan support for sanctions against Russia. So the actual ambassador from Ukraine to the United States wrote an op-ed at The Hill where I used to work saying, yeah, Trump's really bad on this stuff, guys. We're really worried. But, I mean, we think that Ukraine, the government there, no one working for it tried to help Hillary, right? That's the premise we're told. And anybody, it's a debunked conspiracy theory to say otherwise. Okay. Then he goes into Lyshenko and the Black Ledger. He is a former member, or I think still a member of Parliament. This is Lyshenko now. And, quote, a few weeks after Trump's statements about Crimea in August of 2016, Lyshenko took on a new task. On August 28th, the Financial Times published a story, Ukraine's leaders campaign against pro-Putin Trump, which began, for years, Serhiy Lyshenko, a top Ukrainian anti-corruption campaigner, worked to expose kleptocracy under former President Viktor Yanukovych. Now he is focusing on a new perceived pro-Russian threat to Ukraine, U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump. Okay. How many more powerful government and anti-corruption and anti-Russian figures in the Ukrainian government apparatus do we have to find who are openly, deeply opposed to Trump winning the presidency in 2016 because of his Ukraine policy before we think, well, maybe the Ukrainians did kind of want to help out Hillary a little bit? It'd be a little strange, right? And then we get to the mysterious Alexandra Chalupa. The Trump-Ukraine brouhaha has shed light on the activities of a woman named Alexandra Chalupa, who worked in the Clinton White House and later with Democratic National Committee. Chalupa's parents emigrated to the U.S. from Ukraine, and she maintained strong ties to the to the American Ukrainian diaspora and the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine. This was according to a January 2017 article in Politico, Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. Politico reported in 2014, Chalupa had a client, or that in 2014, Chalupa had a client interested in the Ukrainian crisis. As part of that, she began looking into Manafort's activities in Ukraine. Chalupa developed a network of sources in Kyiv and Washington, including investigative journalists, government officials, and private intelligence operatives. When Trump was leading the Republican presidential nominating contest, Chalupa began focusing her research on him. In March of 2016, Chalupa went to the Ukrainian embassy in Washington and shared her concerns with Ambassador Chali and one of his deputies. Not long after, Chalupa spoke again with the DNC, and according to Politico, with the DNC's encouragement, Chalupa asked embassy staff to try to arrange an interview in which President Poroshenko would discuss Manafort's ties to Yanukovych. The embassy said no, but was helpful, according to Chalupa. My friends, this is a lot of evidence. It's a lot of evidence of anti-Trump feelings in Ukraine from the previous Ukrainian government and involving the previous administration in this country's political appointees and even some DNC Oppo researchers. Was any of this investigated? Has anyone looked into any of this? What really happened here? Here's a problem for Democrats. I am quite confident that if there was a real look into all of this, we would find out that Democrat channels somehow got information from Ukrainian counterparts about Paul Manafort, who then became the single biggest target, other than Trump, of course, but the single biggest criminal target of the entire Russia collusion probe. A lot of these people really hated Manafort. And People knew early on here that Manafort was going to be in a lot of trouble, which is also why the Trump campaign fired him, but that's a whole other thing. So what would it mean, though, for this whole narrative about foreign interference and getting involved in our elections if it turns out the Democrats themselves were taking a thing of value, as they call it, information about the opposing political campaign's campaign chairman from a foreign government, getting Oppo research from a foreign government, and then pretending like nothing ever happened? And then what would we think about all of the things they've said about, WikiLeaks and Russia and Russian interference? Was Ukraine, and by Ukraine I mean was the previous Ukrainian administration, which was clearly terrified of Trump's reported fondness for Putin and Russia, which, as we know, was not even an accurate way to describe a situation, but or describe what has happened, certainly since he came into office. But was that Ukrainian government trying to help Hillary win the election? Did the Democrats invite that help, and did they know about it? I can't tell you yet the answer is 100% yes, but I can tell you it certainly looks more than likely that would be the case. And if that is the case, all of this stuff that we would have to go back and look again at everything that they have said about Russia collusion and all the rest of it. And ultimately, it would mean that Trump's request to look into 2016 and corruption and Burisma and the Bidens, because that was all swirling around at this time in 2016, that would have been 100% acceptable, legitimate, and beyond any reasonable doubt the exercise of presidential power in a way that is of benefit, not just to the president, but to the United States as a whole. So they're going to have to do everything they can to suppress this. They're going to have to do everything they can to make sure that we can't even investigate. All these data points I show you, we think that they're not going to find out anything. I think that what do the Democrats think is going to happen, by the way, when the Senate can call witnesses, can subpoena people, when they put Alexandra Chalupa under oath, when they put Hunter Biden under oath? You reap what you sow, Democrats. Team, I hope you're enjoying the show today. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast of The Buck Sexton Show. It is available on iTunes. Also, you can watch on Pluto TV, channel 248, The First. You can watch as we do the things we do here in the Freedom Hut. And we have all kinds of new and exciting projects and more people joining and more things going on to talk to you about in the future. So subscribe on iTunes, and please tell a friend to download and subscribe to the Buck Sexton Show podcast.
It doesn't matter, because right now you have a kangaroo court headed by little Shifty Schiff, where we don't have lawyers, we don't have witnesses, we don't have anything, and yet I just got to watch, and the Republicans are absolutely killing it. They are doing so well because it's a scam. It's a big scam. They're doing something that the founders never thought possible and the founders didn't want, and they're using this impeachment hoax for their own political gain to try and damage the Republican Party and damage the president. But it's had the opposite effect, because you've seen the polls, and we're now the highest. I'm the highest I've ever been in the polls. You don't hear that on television because the news and the Democrats are one and the same. But that's the story.
I certainly think the president's right that it's a scam, but I want to bring in my friend David Harsanyi. He is a senior writer at National Review. He's got great takes on this, short form and long form. David, appreciate you coming back on the program.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, man, what are your takeaways? Sondland today, everyone on the left, all the Democrats making a huge deal about this. I want your overall so what of where we are right now in this impeachment mess.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm of two minds. One is that it's very hard for me to get excited about anything that's going on because I think everyone understands that Trump asked the Ukrainian president to look into Biden's son, and if you think that that's an impeachable offense, you're for it. If you don't, you're not. I don't think anything we're going to hear is going to change that basic story, right? The thing is, people ask me, do you think it's an impeachable offense? And the answer, of course, is yes. Anything that the House wants to impeach for is an impeachable offense if they feel like it and have the votes. The thing is, I think a lot of Republicans feel like there are two sets of rules that we're living by, one for Democrats and one for them, and that Democrats have been trying to impeach this president from day one. So they're trying to overturn the election. I don't like the word coup, but that's what people feel, rightly so in many ways. So I think a lot of this is just political, trying to weaken the president for 2020. He's not going to be removed, and it's kind of like we're just spinning our wheels and wasting our time.
And yet, there are so many people that I see over at some of the cable networks, for example, who like to invoke the founding fathers. Nancy Pelosi is practically in tears when she talks about how solemn an occasion this is. Do you think that for most of the Democrat audience that all this theater is intended for, are they just happy and sort of eating the popcorn while they watch people skewer Trump on TV? Or do you think that they really believe that this is a fair process? I mean, I know I'm asking you to kind of like assess mass opinion in a way, but I'm just curious myself, because I see this and I'm like, I don't think it's possible to be an intelligent person and hear about how the president should be impeached starting right after the election and then have all these different reasons why he should be impeached all along. But now this time around with Adam Schiff running this ridiculous, like, make it up as you go along political process, now this is all solemn and serious. All that other stuff was supposed to be forgotten. I just don't think it's possible.
Buck, I will speak for the people. I think that anyone with two brain cells does not believe that this is some sort of defense of the Constitution. There is no constitutional imperative to impeach someone. Sure, you can do it, but you have the same people who are doing everything they can to corrode the First Amendment, the Second, the Fourth, the Fifth, the 10th, telling me that they're protecting the Constitution by impeaching Donald Trump. I hate to break this to everyone. I'm not a big Donald Trump fan, but he's not done anything worse, and he's probably been far better in protecting the Constitution than the presidents that have come before him. Whether he did it on purpose or not, I don't really care that much, So, and Adam Schiff, I think, is the president's greatest friend. I mean, sometimes it's a criminal proceeding, and sometimes, it's not a criminal proceeding, depending on what they want to do and when they want to do it. It's all just so arbitrary that it just looks ridiculous. I mean, I'm embarrassed to watch it, but not for the reasons Democrats think, and just embarrassed by the entire process. I wish the president...
It really just does seem like a sham. I mean, you've got these people who still cling to, and my feelings about Jake Tapper, Harsanyi. I mean, people like that, though. Don Lemon went on TV last night and said that, he's not a liberal partisan Democrat. I actually laughed. I mean, I don't mean I thought it was amusing. I laughed out loud as the funniest thing I've seen in a long time. Jake Tapper, this is the process. Are these people, do they realize how clownish this is and how absurd they are? Or I just kind of wonder, they think the audience expects them to go through this? Why not just say, well, yeah, we don't like Trump, but we don't want to get rid of him? I mean, everybody knows, right? No one thinks that this is about anything other than attacking Trump.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the corruption of the media, and I don't say that as a means of saying, oh, look, they're biased. I mean, it's corrupt because it's not biased. It's just half-truths or non-truths. And CNN, yesterday I saw the media guy, what's his name, Brian Stelter, talking about finding the truth and digging for the truth. And, CNN, I can, off the top of my head, come up with 10 mistakes they made during this Russia conspiracy hoax stuff that was like brutal, and it all skewed in the same direction, and it changed and had a huge effect and changed the way people thought about the presidency, especially on the left. They think it's illegitimate still. That's a serious corruption, I think, of media. And, sometimes I want to write, listen, I don't want to, when I'm tweeting, I want to write LOL over stuff because I'm literally laughing out loud at what they're saying. But, that's a bit of a cliche these days, I think.
Well, no, but I think that is really the rational response to a lot of what we are seeing right now. It's just, I mean, Adam Schiff saying, for example, he doesn't know the identity of the whistleblower. I mean, that is just absolutely,
one thing about this whistleblower thing that
absurd.
I worked at a newspaper, reported things. If we would always want. There is zero reason for journalists not to mention the name of the whistleblower. It's zero. They should be searching for that name. If this was a Democratic administration and Obama and there was a whistleblower, that name would be all over the place all the time. Everything he'd done since the second grade would be known.
I've seen some conservative leading journalists, by the way, and some outlets too, who all of a sudden are like, we can't say Eric Sharamella is reportedly the whistleblower. I look at them, I'm like, first of all, the anonymity thing for the whistleblower is a fiction. That's not even true. Even I believe the Washington Post gave 3 Pinocchios to Schiff on this thing. There is no statutory anonymity that has to be enforced by everybody. I mean, if people say that you'll go to prison for outing the whistleblower. These are the people that used to want to publish the Pentagon Papers, publish the WikiLeaks trove of classified documents. I look around. I really think that CNN and ABC News, for reasons that are even outside of this discussion we could talk about, and MSN, I think these places are an absurdity now. I really do.
Right. Here's the thing. If you think as a publication that you're not sure that that's the whistleblower, right, that's one thing. If you're not publishing it because you don't want to out a whistleblower, that's ridiculous, as you just lay it out. It's not illegal. Just, BuzzFeed just put the whole dossier online for people to read. It's not... it's ridiculous. More information is something that's positive and something we want in a democracy, and that's what the media is supposed to be giving us.
Now, I want everyone to go read your stuff because I read your stuff, which is why I have you on the show, not just because I like you. Nancy Pelosi is already attacking the legitimacy of the 2020 election. That's up on nationalreview.com right now. Tell me about this one.
Well, she said yesterday, Donald Trump tweeted something, but he had put, he didn't quote her exactly, so everyone dismissed what he said. But what Nancy Pelosi said was, we need to impeach Donald Trump, and I guess remove him, or the 2020 election is in danger. The integrity of the election is in danger. She's already preemptively told us that Donald Trump runs and wins, that the election will be, not legitimate, so illegitimate. So every presidential election they lose is illegitimate in some way, of course. But now we're preemptively saying it's going to be illegitimate, and I still don't understand why. It's corroding public trust in elections, which is what Democrats have been doing for a pretty long time in various ways, and I think it's a dangerous thing to do, though not that they'll care, but so that's what it's about.
I mean, a few things. First of all, we all know the name of the whistleblower, and we know the Democrats are playing games by clinging to the fig leaf that we don't know, and the journos are running around playing dumb, and it does just prove what a dishonest sham this whole thing is, and also what a joke I think mainstream journalism is. But I got to tell you, David, I think it's going to be kind of hilarious when this Ukraine impeachment thing kind of fizzles, and then the House Democrats just go ahead and impeach Donald Trump anyway, based on a laundry list of, we just really don't like him. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, you could. Obstruction of justice is that. You can put whatever you want. Kind of another thing that really makes me laugh out loud.
Yeah, man, it's great.
These congressmen talk about the Ukraine and their voice cracks with emotion about how we're leaving our friends and allies, stranded, and the Russians are coming and all of that stuff. They could not care less about Ukraine. They didn't care about Ukraine when Obama wasn't giving them lethal weaponry, when Obama was allowing the Russians to shoot down airplanes in the Crimea and all of that stuff. It's an absolute joke. It doesn't make anything right or wrong that's happening now, but it does show that just the massive double standard and hypocrisy that's at work here.
Well, also, I think it's fascinating. We have to keep hearing about the risk that Trump ran by delaying the aid that was delivered because, man, those Ukrainians really need those Javelin missiles. And I sit here and I just want to bang my head against the wall. I'm like, right, the things that Obama wouldn't give them.
And took away from Poland and Czech Republic and things like that, right? This idea that Obama was tougher on Russia. Listen, I think that it's a complicated issue, but the idea that Obama was somehow tough on Russia and that Trump has given Putin away, given Europe to Putin is just only someone who's very silly or very, just ridiculous would say something.
Yeah, Russia has what, maybe $1 trillion economy? This is not the Soviet Union all over again, too. I think that Russia looms so large in the minds of so many people now as this threat that's, check your closet and look under your bed before you go to sleep at night. I think Putin's a bad guy. I've been talking about, reading about, and involved in, and going back to even my days in the government. I've been very aware of the bad stuff that a former KGB thug has been doing, stretching back to the fighting in Chechnya. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. But it's not like Russia's about to invade us tomorrow and overturn our elections and all these things we hear all the time. And I just think that they do the public a disservice by creating what is a true hysteria now. I mean, Democrats now really believe that Russia is a mortal adversary to the United States. That's actually not true.
No, I mean, we have different geopolitical.
Yeah, of course, we have oppositional stuff with them, but
right, aims and stuff like that. I mean, no serious person wants to go to war with Russia over anything right now, right? I mean, it's kind of a dangerous rhetoric that even when a Democrat becomes president is never going to follow through on. It's just not reality. And but I do love the hysteria they created, where my parents defected to run away from the Soviet Union, but I get called like a Russian mole all the time, simply because I don't. I defend Donald Trump. It's just such a ridiculous position to put people in, and the whole debate has been sort of co-opted by ridiculous people like Max Boot or whatever, who are just so over the top and so silly.
We're gonna keep talking to David. David, hold on one sec. We'll come right back. Yeah. All right, team, we got David Harsanyi. Check out his piece, Nancy Pelosi is already attacking the legitimacy of the 2020 election. It's up on nationalreview.com now. David, where do you think? I mean, I want to ask you about the Democrat election. I'm sorry, the Democrat. What do you call it when they argue with each other? Debate. Thank you. That's happening tonight. That's not getting much attention. But first, just this impeachment thing. Where do you see it heading at this point? Because I really just believe. I mean, I think the president. I would bet a large sum of money, and I should find a place where I could probably do that. They're going to impeach the president. Doesn't matter what anyone says.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine them backing out of that now, and what that would cause within their, the ranks of Democratic activists and party activists and stuff. So I just don't see how they don't move forward on that. So I think they'll impeach him. I'm almost 100% sure he won't be removed, and he's going to run for president, and nothing really will change. And there might be a slight. I think there might be a slight backlash to all of this, and we'll see about that. But unless there's some new big piece of evidence that shows some kind of criminal wrongdoing, I just don't think this changes much at all. And meanwhile, we have gridlock, which is my favorite form of government, so I'm pretty good with that.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, that while we're fighting about a phone call, an action that was not taken, that did not result in anything because there was no action in a country, 5,000 miles away or something. I don't even know what what as the crow flies distance to Ukraine is. And meanwhile, the country is at a time of relative peace, an economy that is booming, unemployment is super low. It's pretty amazing when you think about it in that way.
When you think about economic growth from 2010 till now, it's been pretty great, right? On almost every way you can measure. It's not perfect, obviously, and those are the years of gridlock. Nothing is getting done in Washington except for some good Trump stuff like rolling back regulations and cutting some taxes, which I think helped this economy, despite what liberals tell you, and is something that does, Trump has less, headspace to make the economy grow, and yet he's still done it and gets no credit for it. Now, presidents get too much credit for the economy, but I think Trump's been relatively good. Imagine if he didn't, engage in trade wars and stuff, but I don't want to argue about that right now.
Yeah, no, I think that, by the way, my theory is that Trump maybe, if he needs to in the election year, says, let's just put this whole trade war thing on hold for a while. I think that, whether that's, short-term, long-term, I think that would actually have a stimulative effect on the economy.
I agree with that, though I do think that the whole standing up to China thing is something that really endears him to many of his most passionate supporters. But then again, those people will be there for him no matter what he does.
No, that's a good point. But I will say that we had Gordon Chang on, what was it, yesterday, and he says that it's amazing how the consensus has flipped now, at least not on whether the trade war is the right thing or not, or good for the economy or not, but the consensus about China's a problem. Everybody now is saying, oh, yeah, China actually was doing really bad stuff, and administrations before Trump weren't doing anything about it.
Yeah, I think I can agree that China was doing bad stuff, but I'm generally, very.
I know you're a free trade guy. You're
a free trade guy, but
you're a consistent fellow.
But I will admit that it hasn't really had the negative effect, it seems to me at least, that I thought it would. So I think that's something I need to concede.
We have to we got to. I know, David, you probably have a life you have to lead. But we're going to keep you because we're going to ask you about the elect. I keep saying election. I'm sorry about the debate. The debate that is going to happen tonight, and also a little bit of what you see coming up in conservative circles about capitalism. I don't know if it's capitalism with a heart that we're talking about here, or capitalism that brings out the best in people. But there's been some interesting discussions going on there. We're talking to David Harsanyi, everybody, nationalreview.com. Check out his piece. Nancy Pelosi is already attacking the legitimacy of the 2020 election. And we'll be back in just a second here.